All right, guys, the evolution of the aquaculture system converted over from the wicking beds continues. I got some comments from you guys concerned about stagnant pots, pockets, and things like that, and some suggestions for fixing it. Well, I appreciate them. I'm going to explain to you why most of them anyway were not going to work very well, and I'm going to tell you how to use this really highly sophisticated calibration tool to calibrate the flow in an aquatic system. So one of the things was, well, why don't you just take the return line and make 3 returns instead of 1 return? Okay, we want to have a pretty aggressive return because that creates oxygenation, and really this thing's turned up because the first time I tried to do this video and use one hand to turn it down and up, I actually knocked the end off and screwed the video up. So this is coming from the lower pond to this highest point, and it's draining down to the middle pond and down to the end. If we want to, and it'll make really a lot of sense by the end of this video, if we want this flow to go through these 3, we have to cut that by 1/3, and we have to get exactly 1/3 in each location. We could do it, but we wouldn't get that great agitation from that high pressure there at the top of the system, which is something we want to do. And we'd create multiple points of failure with very little cushion. If they fail, we start having the system overdrive. In other words, too much water's coming in, not enough water can get out, we start overflowing the tanks. Sooner or later we kick in the float valve down there and shut it off, but that's when that system's drained. That's like an oh shit valve. That's not how we're going to run the system. We want the system to stay stable and balanced, okay? So what we've done, and I would have had this video for you yesterday, except the first pump I got was DOA. There's a second pump, a very small, light duty pump, light draw wattage pump in there. It's pumping up, and it's moving water out these 2 spigots. You can see it's a very gentle flow. There's a reason. There's an actual science to what's going on here. Even though these 3 tanks are all plumbed common on the bottom, and they all effectively act like one giant 450-gallon tank instead of 3 separate 150-gallon tanks, it does take time if you pump water from this tank to this tank for everything to equalize back. If we have a single flow in and a single flow out, it stays nice in stasis. But if we're drawing from one, giving to the other, there's a time, and if we go faster than that equalization can happen, that tank starts to drain, this tank starts to overflow, the head pressure increases, that increases the flow of water there, that overdrives that stand up. Both this, you say this tank and this tank overflow, this tank gets low, that tank overflows, that thing gets low, the oh shit valve goes off, everything tries to equalize again, and eventually we lose a lot of water from the system. That's not what we want. So what we want is a balanced system. So we want to try to get about the same amount of water coming in is the same amount of water going to these other 2 tanks. If it's a little bit more, it's okay. There's a cushion here. There's a lot of cushion between these 3 tanks. The closer we can get the balance, the better. We really want the amount of water coming out of there to be almost exactly the amount of water coming in up here. If none of this makes sense, please watch the first 3 videos in the series and it'll make sense. So watch how we use this highly scientific calibration tool. We come under here and we count 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, 6,000, 7,000, 8,000, 9,000, 10,000. So 10 seconds for this cup to fill off the inflow. So we'd like somewhere between, oh, I don't know, 18 and 20 seconds, 16 and 20 seconds each for these, because you're going to cut the value in half. We got cushion there. So if these come in around 16 seconds, we've got the flow set right. 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, 6,000, 7,000, 8,000, 9,000, 10,000, 11,000, 12,000, 13,000, 14,000, 15,000, 16,000. Beautiful. Okay. 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, 6,000, 7,000, 8,000, 9,000, 10,000, 11,000, 12,000, 13,000, 14,000, 15,000, 16,000, 17,000, 18,000. Okay, so when we average that out, we get about 17 seconds between the two. We cut that in half. We end up at about 8 seconds, 8.5 seconds. Let's do this one again. 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, 6,000, 7,000, 8,000, 9,000. A little bit faster this time. There is some variance with these valves. So we're very, very close to balanced, and there's a lot of forgiveness between here. So now what we want to do is come over here, and we'd like to see water coming out to fill the cup at about every 8 to 9 seconds out of the discharge. That means that we're going to have a pretty balanced system. 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, 6,000, 7,000, 8,000, 9,000. Almost perfect. Okay, if you use this method and you're a couple seconds off, don't get all flustered, because there's going to be variations in the system. This side is going to build up a little bit and overtake that side, and then that side's going to equalize out. If you're within a few seconds, just like we are here, everything is perfectly balanced. Everything's going to stay in check, and the oh shit valve is truly an oh shit valve, not a system running valve. So that's what we've got going on now. You see we got a bunch of plants in here. You guys are worried about algae. Not going to be a lot of algae growing underneath all that. We've got some mint going. We've got some other water plants in some baskets. We've got floating plants. Everything's looking good. And we probably won't run this many plants in these tanks. This is just until we get the shade overhead, and then we can back off some. We're also going to put a bunch of duckweed in here. And that's why it's nice to be running these valves at such a slow speed, because duckweed actually likes a really non-disturbed water. So again, if you watch this video and you found it on YouTube or something like that, and this is not making sense to you, it's probably because you don't understand how the whole system works. So there's a playlist on this. Go ahead to part 1 and come all the way up to here, and it'll make sense. If you have questions or suggestions, keep them coming. And remember, just because I don't take your suggestions doesn't mean I don't appreciate them. It's just that I've been doing this a long time, and in this particular system, dealing with our unique issues, I've got it pretty well worked out. And again, you don't need really expensive calibration tools. A cup, a bucket, any size device, and the bigger the more accurate your calibrations will be, because the more forgiveness there is, the more leniency there is in some variations. Yes, you could use a stopwatch or whatever, but counting by 1,000 seems to work pretty good. We've got a very balanced system now. I'll catch up with you later.